Okay, so this terrible racial atrocity took place in 1967, and of course, the picture starts with some beautiful African American. What would I call it? It's kind of very simple art, country art. There's a word for it, but I can't remember it. But anyway, it starts with that, and it has a little bit of a preview where it says, there was a great migration. Of course, the blacks came up from the South looking for work in the North. But when they came, they found there was bigotry here too, and there was a lot of, and they were, as it says in this introduction, they were restricted. Blacks were restricted to certain neighborhoods. The police force was almost entirely white. There was a lot of racial tension. A lot of the hopes of having a better life did not pan out, and there was a lot of segregation, and there was just a lot of tension. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff going on now where first let's talk about what the right, there are people on the right who are saying stuff about this film that's incorrect, okay? That they're saying, well, look, you can't say that blacks were restricted to certain neighborhoods. There was no policy, there was no government policy restricting blacks to certain neighborhoods. Well, the fact is that if you were black and you went into certain neighborhoods and tried to get housing, you wouldn't get it. And there was stuff called redlining, and there was, redlining. What's interesting about redlining, of course, this was where the banks wouldn't give money to certain areas. And you know what really exacerbated redlining? It was FDR's New Deal. Because they started the federal housing, whatever it was, the Federal Housing Agency, and like everything the government does, it was a complete screw up, and it did the opposite of what they wanted to do, and it redlined. That idea of things being in red comes from the law starting this agency. And anyway, it was very tough for black people to get in. There's stuff in the movie that's manipulated, okay? The scenes in the Algiers hotel are just harrowing. To watch these Americans who are African American or Black American, whatever you want to call them, Americans, being tormented by policemen is a terrible thing to behold. Anybody who's ever dealt with the police knows it's very frightening. The police have a lot of power. You want them being the kind of professionals that most of us run into. Most police officers are. Back in those days, a lot more of this went on, and it went on with whites too, but it went on especially in black neighborhoods. There were a lot of bigotry. Look, the film shows the victims in the most sympathetic light. There are two white girls in there. They kind of make them look like they're girls just wanting to have fun. All the information I can get about them is they were, in fact, prostitutes at the Algiers hotel. I'm sure a lot of the people who were rounded up were criminals. It was that kind of place. They show you them in the most sympathetic light. Okay, and the security guard who you saw, that's that guy from Star Wars, Boyega, John Boyega, is that? Yeah. Excellent actor. I mean, all the actors. Anthony Mackie is in it. He is great. He should really be in more stuff. I mean, I know he does a superhero turn, but he really should be in more stuff. He is a great actor. All the acting is terrific. And the British actor who plays the main racist cop, let me see if I got his name here. It is Will Poulter. And he's great because he has this innocent, sweet, he's British, but he has this innocent, sweet, all-American face. And they just use it very well. As to make him a psychopath is really frightening. Okay, so they manipulate you a little bit. Obviously, when riots start, there's a lot of people having fun. When you see they intersperse actual clips of the riots. And one of the frightening things about riots is people go nuts. I mean, people start to really have fun burning things down, and they cheer each other on and all this stuff. Let's talk about the racism thing just a minute. When there is a dominant culture and a successful culture, it is absolutely natural for those in that culture, for those who come from other cultures, to want to be part of it, to want to imitate it. Why not, right? It's the successful culture. If you're a tribe living in the dark and the tribe next to you invents fire, you're going to start to want their fire because you don't want to live in the dark. It would be absurd to have somebody at the New York Times writing, well, we don't want to use, that's cultural appropriation. We don't want to use their fire. Of course, that is how good ideas spread. So when you have a country like England that is doing well and is bringing in immigrants from India, the Indians want to become like the Englishmen. They want to talk English, and they want to wear English suits, and when you have a white culture that is doing well, and the blacks have been kept out of it, they want to become part of it. They want to become businessmen. They want to learn to speak well. They want to become partake of the successful society. When they are excluded because of tribalism, it's not just racism is a sub order of tribalism. You know, we all have our tribes. All you have to do is take a baseball player in a Boston Red Sox hat, and the New Yorkers hate him. Let him turn that hat into a New York Yankees hat. Suddenly they love him. I mean, that's how tribal we are. When you exclude people, they become alienated from that main culture, and they think, screw it. I'm not going to become part of this culture. I'm going to tear it down. I'm going to live on the outskirts. I'm going to be alienated. I'm going to become a criminal class. Happened to the Jews in Russia. Happened to the Irish in England. It has happened to black people here. And so there is a reason to this, but now that's the macro view of it. Now look at the micro view of it. You're walking down the street and a black guy mugs you. What do you care about the macro view of it? You don't care about that. All you know is your black guy mugged you, a black guy mugged a friend of yours, black guys are burning your city down. That's all you know, and that's a completely rational point of view. The macro view, the micro view of it is just as rational as the macro view of it. And this is the thing, when you have a press that concentrates only on the big view and doesn't take into account the fact that there are innocent white people, innocent black people in a neighborhood being, tormented by these riots, tormented by the black criminal class, you're not seeing the whole picture. The picture goes both ways. And when you only look at one side of it, you exacerbate the tension between the two groups of people. The problem with this movie, and it's a really good movie, and I recommend it, and it's worth watching. The problem with this movie is nothing that's in the movie. The little stuff they do to manipulate you in favor of the victims of the crime is perfectly valid movie stuff. It's a movie. It's a Hollywood movie. If you're getting your history from the movies, you're in the wrong place. It's perfectly valid. It's not that bad. They show you that the thug, and he is a thug, fires a weapon out the window, terrifying the police. They show you that the police, they're good police officers. It concentrates on a bad cop, but they show you they're very good police officers trying to do their job. They show you like all the tension everybody is under, but it is about an atrocity, and it really took place, and it really was an atrocity. These guys confessed to the crime. The confessions were, well, I won't go on because I don't want to spoil everything about it, but it really was an atrocity. The problem is with the reviews and the interviews that Kathryn Bigelow has been giving. Here is Kathryn Bigelow, the director, on the CBS morning show, and just listen to what they're saying about this movie.
Entertainment Weekly says it's, quote, an American horror story rooted so deeply and shamefully in home soil that it is still painful to watch half a century later. And it is painful.
Painful to watch, and so relatable today.
So
that's
relatable.
What's scary.
What made you want to tell this story?
Well, predominantly that it is so relatable to today. When I was first introduced to it, it was right around the time of Ferguson, Missouri. And I'm thinking, this is 50 years ago today, and yet it's happening today. It's happening tomorrow. It's happening, it's recurring far too often. And so I hope that it could perhaps invite a dialogue to encourage a bridge between an incredible racial divide in this country.
What the hell is she talking about? What the hell is she talking about? This was 1967. These cops, you were dealing with an influx of people that exacerbated racism. There was racism. They were all white. And just like having all liberals on TV and all they do is reinforce their opinions, when you have all whites on a major metropolitan police force with a black population, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to reinforce their bigoted positions. Listen to this from, I think this is from USA Today. It is from USA Today. She says, I lost it. There it is. Wait a minute. I will find it exactly. Here it is. Very early on in the picture, Will Poulter, the racist cop, very early on shoots a looter in the back with his shotgun. And the cop calls him in and says, hey, I'm going to recommend murder charges for your doing that. And Poulter just sort of shrugs it off. He doesn't feel anything's going to happen to him. USA Today review. It's impossible to take in the scene without seeing Trayvon Martin's face or Michael Brown's. Well, guess what? I didn't see that. Why not? Because Michael Brown was a thug who attacked a cop. They're living in a mythology where it's still 1967. Here's Heather McDonald, one of our favorites, wrote the book The War on Cops, just talking in a PragerU video about the actual statistics of police violence against black people today. This is number 9.
When it comes to the subject of American police, blacks, and the deadly use of force, here is what we know. A recent deadly force study by Washington State University researcher Lois James found that police officers were less likely to shoot unarmed black suspects than unarmed white or Hispanic ones in simulated threat scenarios. Harvard economics professor Roland Fryer analyzed more than 1,000 officer-involved shootings across the country. He concluded that there is zero evidence of racial bias in police shootings. In Houston, he found that blacks were 24% less likely than whites to be shot by officers, even though the suspects were armed or violent.
This movie bombed because they told us it was about today. They told us we have not come anywhere. They did that sinister thing. You know, Barack Obama's policies failed. They failed in the Middle East. They failed at home. They failed just about everywhere. His policies were wrong on everything. And as he went on, he started to play the race card more and more. And the way he did it was on targeting police. And he was targeting the police so that federal investigators could come in and look over the police's shoulder and institute the kind of 1970s restrictions on police that caused the upsurge in crime in the first place, that had to be, you know, that they had to respond to with better policing. They did this with The Handmaid's Tale, too, where they said, oh, yeah, this is a story about today. The freest women who have ever walked the face of the planet, American women, looking at a dystopian story like The Handmaid's Tale and say, yeah, it's just like now. Excuse me, could I have another Mai Tai, while I'm, sitting here in my brownstone in New York that I own, and talk about how I'm living through The Handmaid's Tale? I mean, this is the same thing, We just got through an administration with a black president, a black attorney general, a black, virtually, I won't say it was a black administration. That's not true. But it was a fully integrated administration. But if nothing else, proved that people were willing to elect a black president twice. Okay, we are not living in that world. For the left, though, it's always this fantasy of crisis that gives. Because why? Because when there's a crisis, people get afraid and they're willing to turn over power to the government. That is why. And it's always a crisis. It's always 1967. They're always heroes standing up for the people. And it's offensive. It's offensive. It's offensive to say to these police officers, since the 60s, policing has become so much more of a professional occupation. The cops, when you watch cops on the streets of New York, first of all, they look like everybody. I mean, they've got every color of skin. They're women, they're men. When you watch them, you are watching a highly trained, professional, paramilitary force policing one of the biggest cities on earth excellently well. I mean, really well. That is what you're watching. I'm not saying there's not an individual racist somewhere along the line, guys who do bad things. I'm just saying that the idea that this film represents it's a good historical document. It's good to remember. This stuff really happened. And when the right plays it down and says, oh, it wasn't so bad, I was alive. It was bad. It was bad. Black people, the treatment of black people is inexcusable in this country. There's no writing it out of history. It's a real thing. It's a real deal. But to say that it keeps going on just makes the situation worse because it's offensive to people in a country where whites are suffering too, where everybody's suffering. Only when you stop judging people by the color of their skin does the injustice stop. As long as you do it, you can't make it right. You cannot make it right.